we don't speak of womankind. We speak of man, not woman. We talk about the average man on the street, and in so doing we invisibilize all females. When we speak in the pronoun, we speak about he, not she. We use a generic pronoun. I'm a lecturer in men and masculinities at the University of the West Indies, and I always ask my class, how many of you seriously would prefer a tomboy or a sissy as their offspring? No one wants a sissy. Everyone, if you have to choose, chooses a tomboy. Because the elevation of the male as supreme is pervasive in all dimensions of society. We use terms like bachelor and now bachelorette, but not spinster, because spinster carries a connotation of something negative, something unattractive. But why, if you are male, you are considered a bachelor, and that is something awesome. There's a measure of adoration in being a bachelor, but not a spinster. Spinster is a curse word. And even in literature, we use the concept of every man. The point is, the socio-linguistic landscape, without even looking at gender, and we are talking about academics, researchers, activists, use a language of the masculine. The Caribbean scenario is a developing society. The islands of Trinidad and Tobago is exceedingly rich in oil and natural gas. And all over the world, investors come from to invest in Trinidad and Tobago. And the language is such that it is a language of masculinity without us even being aware of it. When we speak of the need to penetrate the market, or a firm being impotent to stop a takeover, they lack testicular fortitude. We say he doesn't have the balls to confront something, how they screwed up the deal, and we speak of who's on top, because who's on top reigns supreme, and that is the traditionalist perspective in sexuality. So the language of sexuality is used by males and females throughout. What then is the impact of it? It's not good, because the language of sexuality is evident in all sectors of life. It promotes androcentrism. That notion of the male is supreme, the male is elevated, the male is ideal, and therefore history teaches us for one world civilization to ascend, another has to descend. And if the male rises, the female sinks. It therefore creates gender inequality. But what is worse is this thing is ongoing, and it's perpetuated by the agents of male gender socialization, such as the home, the education sector, peer group, religion in itself. And what is even worse is that this language of masculinity, although it elevates the male, is used and reproduced by many women because they are simply unaware of what they are doing and they accept it. What then is this thing about? We know that masculinities are fluid and dynamic. It is never static, it is always changing. Because of the Caribbean's experience of colonization, the Caribbean is largely fed by patriarchy. There are many fights against patriarchy. Many feminisms have been fighting against it. There has been a birth and growth of a men's movement across the Caribbean. But still, patriarchy resides in the home. And this means that there are different behaviors and perceptions regarding sexuality. And these things are constantly changing, but ever present is the notion that the male is supreme. As long as we discuss gender equality or gender inequality, it is impossible, I think, to divorce it from notions of power and powerlessness. Because power and powerlessness are tied into the concepts and constructs of gender and gender identity. It will be useful then to research how men and boys use language to determine their perceptions of and their behaviors towards sexuality. The purpose of this study, therefore, is to examine the social realities that exist in terms of men's gender language use regarding sexuality, and to use related findings to inform practices in our homes, in our schools, where they matter, in the boardroom, and to create awareness of pressure points faced by males in a society that is expected to conform to a police status quo regarding attitudes towards sexuality and behaviors of sexuality. Language use in the Caribbean has historically been anchored in a range of ideologies, including colonial sensibility, patriarchy, And if you visit the Caribbean, you will see every person there. The white, the Caucasian, the Chinese, the Indian, the African, mixed races, the Syrian and Middle Eastern merchants. They are all present. Early gendered language studies pointed to the concepts of women's language and men's language. And there was a dichotomy that was felt to have operated. But this was a polarization concept that is dated. You see, women curse as well. Perhaps not publicly, perhaps not prolifically, but women do curse. And there was research that points to a polarization between men's language and female's language being dated. The thing is, language is an aspect of culture. Any person's culture is fed and watered by language. And sexuality forms a pivotal element of any culture that helps to construct masculine identity. In fact, in the Caribbean, men hold themselves proud to be sexual beings. And their identity, if you ask them, how do you define yourself as a man? Sexuality accounts for more than 90% of the responses. Whether it's virility, whether it's the capacity to father a child, or whether it's the notion of heterosexuality. But it is all revolving around sexuality. There are some definitions. Just to put this in context, what do we mean by gendered language? The spoken and written forms of communication which distinguish men and women in their verbal behavior. This study is concerned with male gendered language use. Masculinity, for the purposes of this discussion, is seen as the behaviors, attitudes, and values associated with maleness. In Western society, where the Caribbean is, masculinity is often associated with strength, power, hardness, and control. And I believe we can see parallels across the world with that concept of masculinity. Sexuality refers to the social process which creates, organizes, expresses, and directs erotic desire. And the final one is patriarchy, that overarching structure of male dominance and privilege which is reflected in the Caribbean social system, all dimensions of the Caribbean. This leads me to my research question. What am I trying to uncover here? I'm looking for the linguistic constructions, those labels, those cultural tags that concern sexuality, be it heterosexuality or a non-heterosexual form of sexuality, that offer shared and significant meaning among boys and men. And how have these constructions, these labels and tags been reflected in men's use of language? As I said before, it's impossible for me to divorce power and powerlessness. So we look to see how language, how using gendered language creates power and creates powerlessness among men over other men, among men over women, in terms of sexuality. How has this language contributed to male privileging and also praising the elevated status of women or the derogated status of women as a result? This just shows the related literature in terms of gender and linguistics and the marriage between both. All right? My research was a qualitative inquiry because I felt that participants can offer their own meaning, their own categories of meaning, reflecting social construction, historical construction. And basically, my theory, I realize it's not showing here, is anchored in sociolinguistics, social constructionism, and particularly the range of feminisms that exist. I really can't see how we could explore masculinity without any discussion on feminism. Feminisms inform masculinity. In fact, masculinity studies, men's studies, and the men's movement emerge and evolve out of a response to feminism. So, who did I use? It's qualitative inquiry. I used 15 male university students, aged 17 to 23, and the fathers or the male figures in the lives of these students. So I used 30 men. These 30 men represented 5 ethnic groups across the Caribbean, from 4 Caribbean nations, 3 social classes, the working class, the lower middle class, and the middle class. Inclusive among these 30 men was 1 bisexual, 3 homosexual, and 26 heterosexual, according to what they describe themselves, how they describe themselves. To collect data, I saw some participants using NGOs, and they were able to add more, creating the links. And I basically used 4 means of gathering information, largely to cross-reference to get the accuracy and the honesty among men. So I used a rating scale with 10 questions asking about the language that they use and how they think it impacts on their sexuality. Then I had some semi-structured group interviews to speak with them, a small group, and then I had the in-depth individual interview to cross-reference what they were telling me in the semi-structured group interview. And one finding emerged instantly. Men will say what they think other men want to hear about them. And when they are speaking to me as an individual, then you get what could be seen as the sincerity. Some of them wrote because they were not comfortable speaking, and therefore the narrative inquiry juxtaposed to the other elements give me my information. So I basically collected the raw data, put it in table form, look at content analysis, coded the major themes to get these findings, and these are the general findings. Fundamentally, basically, and generally, there were dichotomous sexual terms and expectations long-standing in the Caribbean, and they contribute to male privileging. So the terms and the language used in constructing a boy's sexuality, making him into a man, was one of male privileging. For example, the concept of the village ram is prominent in the Caribbean. The village ram refers to the male who is promiscuous. That's all. He's promiscuous. He has sex with multiple partners. The only difference between the village ram and the old hoe, which is the derogative of a whore, is that she is female. That's all. She can be of the same social class. She can be of the same religion, same ethnicity. Because she sleeps around, she's called an old hoe. So the male is privileged. He's a village ram, and he's held in awe because he does that. But if a female does it, immediately it's derogatory. So a term, a linguistic expression, is associated with her. The experienced husband versus the virginal bride. On the wedding night, the man is expected to be experienced. The woman is expected to be pure and chaste. So there's that dimension of male privileging with sexuality. Another finding is that labels afforded women are declared publicly among the working class, but privately among the middle classes. So both classes refer to women as pieces of skin. But in the public domain, in the male gender spaces, in the corner, in the rum shop, or the bar, or the pub, in the play field, right? The working class overtly speak of women as pieces of skin, bitch, family, love, sugar, darling, sweetheart. And there's nothing love and sugary and sweethearty about these labels when they're used, right? It's more condescending. It's not uplifting at all. Scatter, skank. The middle class men do not use it privately, but they will think of a person like it. And they may even say it to an individual woman, but not in the midst of others. Another finding is a proliferation of male gender biased linguistic constructions among the heterosexual participants, particularly the older ones. So the fathers of the university students had a strong, those who were heterosexual, had a very strong bias in terms of gender language use, and that came out to the fore. There was a linguistic dichotomy as well between the penetrator and the penetratee in the sexual relationships of the homosexual and bisexual participants that values the former and subjugates the latter, which rings true of patriarchy, the person being on top. The penetrator, the one who has sex, we're talking about in the non-heterosexual relationship. The penetrator is seen as supreme. The penetrator can use labels against the penetratee, because the penetratee is passive, is the one who something is happening to. The penetrator is active, the doer of the action, and he takes control of the situation. The comparatively active role of the traditional male in acts of sexuality, that's the doer of the penetration, elevates the status of males and affords a degree of power over the comparatively passive role of the traditional female, resulting in the latter being regarded as less powerful. So, in using particular language during the sex act, the traditional female in heterosexual relationships is made to feel less than. And that is because power is ascribed to the male, the doer of the action. And it is actually the overarching finding among all participants, regardless of ethnicity, age, social class, and nationality. There is the subjugation of women. The occurrence of generational transmission of these perceptions as a dimension of father-son bonding and familial cultural practices regardless of nationality, ethnicity, and social class. In other words, boys become men by following in the footsteps of their father. Their fathers actually prescribe the culture, and it's repetitious, and boys become their fathers. Girls and women perpetuate the use of the binary linguistic labels and tags, and resultant value system among men and women in their conversation with men and other women. So this point is saying that without knowing it, girls and women foster it as well. They are partners, they are in complicity with the males, although they are victims themselves, without knowing. But those are the findings, and those point to strong gender inequality. And we're talking about gender inequality regarding sexuality among heterosexuals, among the bisexuals, and the homosexuals. So moving forward, there's a need to immediately address the weakened gender relations, which has diminished gender sensitivity and unequal gender justice perpetuated through gender language use by men regarding sexuality. So a focused plan has to be put forward. This is in the making, and it involves working in partnership. I'm sorry about the color. It obviously didn't appear that bad here. But working in partnership. Too often we rely on gender activists, men's social group, women's social group, the women's movement to effect change. But the plan we have in the Caribbean involves far more than that. It involves, first of all, the education sector. And there is the need to interrogate the curriculum. Why are some subjects seen as female subjects and some subjects as males? And why can't we cross the barriers and disrupt the norm? Even the textbooks that are used project an image of the male and the female in terms of the sexual division of labor that works against gender identity. It creates gender inequality. So there's a need to interrogate the curriculum and textbooks used in the education sector. CBOs and NGOs. In the Caribbean, we have a men's movement, a prominent one called Caribbean, the Caribbean Male Action Network, and that has been moving on to assist. And there is a powerful, powerful women's movement in the Caribbean that is partnering as well. One of the things I want to point out in the third one quickly, and I'm ending here, is in terms of government policy. One of the things that the women's movement has been strongly successful in doing is in disbanding a national ministry of women's affairs and imprisoned the arm of the government to create a ministry of gender affairs. And instantly it drew in men from all walks of life because they see themselves reflected in gender affairs and not women's affairs. Finally, I want to talk about the home as being pivotal and being instrumental in the use of particular language that creates particular constructions of masculinity in the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ivan. I think that with your presentation, it makes very much clear about how wide the homophobic and misogynist language is increasing in some of the islands in that region, and how much the work has been done, but still that this has to be done a lot of more work on this. Maybe you have heard that even there has been some ban to some of the music produced in Jamaica. In some countries, there are some women's movement that has been stopping the distribution of this music, and this is some of the examples that come from this region. And this is, for us, this is one of the regions that represents maybe the more risky situation for LGBT people. This is in the whole continent, this is the only area in which being homosexual is still criminalized in the Americas. So I think that with your research, you're bringing us some other dimensions that we have to take in account, and how can we work better to really try to deconstruct all these cultures that has been spread all over the Caribbean. And now I'm going to give the floor to Kiran Ramchandra. She's a community coordinator. Kiran is the community coordinator at Mukti Parasha Institute and the president of this institute. She's going to speak in her own language, and we have a translator that will help us during the presentation.
सबको नमस्कार। मेरा नाम किरण है और मैं सेक्स वर्कर हूँ। मैं सांगली महाराष्ट्र से आई हूँ और मेरे संस्था का नाम है संग्राम, और हमारा जो सीडीओ है उसका नाम है वैश्यान्याय मुक्ति परिषद।
Hello, my name is Kiran. I'm here from Sangli Sangram and I'm a sex worker. My organization's name is Sangram, and the CBO we work in is called वैश्यान्याय मुक्ति परिषद।
आज मैं आपसे जो बात करने वाली हूँ, ये केस स्टडी हमने वैम्प ने इसलिए लिए हैं क्योंकि वैम्प की जो गिरिजा है उसका नाम हमने यहाँ पे चेंज किया है। उसने अपने लैंगिक अनुभव हमारे साथ शेयर करने के लिए वो मतलब बहुत जल्दी राजी हो गई।
The case study was taken by VAMP because Girija, whose case study we are presenting and whose name has been changed, was open to sharing a sexual relationship with the VAMP team.
और वो वैम्प के साथ काफी सालों से काम कर रही है। वो अपने विचार क्लाइंट और सेक्स वर्कर के रिलेशनशिप के बारे में जो भी है वो शेयर करने के लिए हमारे साथ तैयार हुई।
She's been working with the VAMP team for the last few years and agreed in sharing her insights on client sex worker relationships with the team without any hesitation of losing anonymity.
और हमने उसको ये भी बताया कि आपकी ये जो केस स्टडी है वो मेन सिंपोजियम के लिए दिल्ली को जो हो रहा है वहाँ पे जाने वाली है।
She was also informed that this case study will be presented as part of a study done by VAMP and presented at the Men Engage Symposium.
गिरिजा भी सेक्स वर्कर है और वो सांगली में रहती है। वो पिछले 20 सालों से सेक्स वर्क में है और वो पिछले 10 सालों से वैम्प के साथ जुड़ के है।
The following case study is Girija. Girija is a sex worker who lives in Sangli. She has been a sex worker for the last 20 years. She has been part of the VAMP collective for the last 10 years.
और अभी वो वैम्प इंस्टीट्यूट में कम्युनिटी कोऑर्डिनेटर का काम करती है।
Currently she is working as a community coordinator at the VAMP Institute.
गिरिजा ने बोला कि सेक्स वर्क और क्लाइंट के बीच का जो रिलेशनशिप होता है उसमें बहुत फ्रीडम और बहुत क्लोजनेस होता है।
Girija stated that the relationship between the sex worker and the client entails freedom as well as closeness.
कस्टमर हमारे साथ जो बात कर सकता है, जो बात हमारे साथ वो शेयर कर सकता है, वो शायद ही किसी और के साथ न करता हो।
The conversations which the clients share with us, they normally do not share it with anybody else.
और वो इसलिए मतलब उसकी हिचकिचाहट इसलिए होती है कि वो उसके ऊपर समाज का बहुत दबाव होता है, ना तो वो अपने बीवी के साथ शेयर कर सकता है ना और किसी के साथ।
The client is normally apprehensive to share these conversations with others because there are expectations which are put on him or her by the society, family and the wife.
जब हम फ्रीडम के बारे में बात करते हैं तो क्लाइंट की जो बातें हमारे साथ होती है, वो जो सेक्सुअली डिजायर या भावनिक होती है, वो बातें वो अपने बीवी के साथ तक नहीं कर सकता।
When we talk about freedom which we share with the client, the talks are mainly related to their sexual desires and feelings which they might not be able to talk to their wives about.
कस्टमर के मर्दानी हाव भाव होते हैं, वो सिर्फ उसके सेक्स के परफॉर्मेंस तक ही सीमित नहीं है, उसके अंदर घनिष्ठता और रिलेशनशिप भी चाहिए।
The customer's masculine behavior is not just limited to the customer's performance in sex, but it is also related to the intimate relationship which might include a lot of things like love, etc. within the sex worker and the client.
और वो उनमें मौजूद भी होती है, जैसे कि कोई कस्टमर आया, उसे किसी औरत को नंगा देखना अच्छा लगता है, सिर्फ नंगा देखेगा, उसके बदन पे कपड़े नहीं होने चाहिए, वो देखेगा, उसका समाधान हो जाएगा, वो निकल जाएगा। और जैसा कि किसी के सिर्फ बालों में हाथ घुमाना, ऐसे समझो कोई कस्टमर आया, उसने उसके बालों में हाथ घुमाया, फिर उसके समझो फिर उसके बाल संवारे, जैसे कि हम एक दूसरे के बाल संवारते हैं, चोटी डालते हैं, उस तरह से, और उनको भी इसी में उनका सेक्सुअली प्लेजर होता है।
The sexual pleasure, according to the client, can range from various degrees and activities. The client might just see the woman naked and not do anything, and still will enjoy and pay the sex worker and go out. The client might want to just play with her hair. The client might just want to comb her hair, and that is what he defines it as as a sexual pleasure he is getting from the sex worker.
हम जिस समाज में रहते हैं, वो सिर्फ लिंग भाव में मर्द और औरत को देखता है। जो हमारे यहाँ तृतीय पंथी है, वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट के बाद भी समाज उनको समाज के किसी कोने में ही रह रही है, खुल के ऐसे सामने नहीं आ रहे हैं। जैसे कोई मर्द जो औरतों को कुछ हाव भाव में जीना चाहता है, या फिर कोई औरत जो मर्दों के कुछ हाव भाव में जीना चाहती है, ये सब चीजें जो है वो सोसाइटी चेष्टा करती है अपने से अलग करने की। इस स्तर पे मुझे लगता है कि सेक्स वर्कर इन लोगों को ज्यादा तौर पे जो मर्द होते हैं उन्हें एक स्पेस देती है।
The society we live in believes only in the man or the woman. The third gender, even after the Supreme Court judgment which came out in April 2014, is someone who still lives in the corner. And additionally, when other genders come to play, like a man wanting to have behavioral attributes of a woman or a woman wanting to have attributes of a man, such aspects are always shunned out of or tried to be shunned out of the society. In this case, the belief that the sex worker provides these individuals with spaces. These individuals are especially males because mostly the sex workers get clients which are majorly men to deviate from various gender norms for a small amount of time.
जहाँ वो अपने समाज के लिंग भाव के अपेक्षा से बाहर आ सकते हैं, चाहे वो कितने भी छोटे समय के लिए न हो। जैसा कि एक कस्टमर आया, उस कस्टमर ने कहा कि मैं अपने बीवी से बहुत परेशान होकर आया हूँ, आज मुझे जैसा चाहिए वैसा सोने देगी क्या? तो ठीक है बोला, हाँ, अब वो पैसा देगा तो मुझे उसके साथ सोना तो है, इसलिए बोला कि हाँ ठीक है चलो। तो उसने जिस तरह से मुझे मांग की, तो उसने मुझे ये भी पूछा कि तेरी इसमें मर्जी है क्या? ऐसा नहीं कि बस वो आया पैसा दे रहा है इसलिए वो मेरे पे थोप पे चला गया, कोई बातें। तो वो उस कस्टमर ने मेरी भी चाह देखी उसने, और जाते समय ये बोला कि जो मुझे चाहिए था वो मिल गया। तो उस टाइम पे मैंने भी बोला कि जो मुझे भी चाहिए था वो भी मिल गया।
She's giving an example where there was a client who asked her if she will allow him to sleep with her the way he wants to. When she asked, then he asked about her desires and he slept with her, where his masculinity, according to the client, was defined by how he pleasured her while paying her for his sexual desires.
जैसे कि कुछ लोगों को मर्दानगी मतलब कैसा, कुछ लोग ऐसा समझते हैं मर्दानगी मतलब रफ सेक्स करना, या फिर कुछ लोग सीमन को ही अपनी मर्दानगी समझते हैं। जैसा कि कस्टमर आया एक बार और मतलब कहने लगा कि मेरे साथ विदाउट कंडोम आज के दिन सेक्स करना। मैंने बोला क्यों ऐसा क्यों, मैं तो विदाउट कंडोम सेक्स कर ही नहीं सकती, तेरे भी जान को खतरा मेरे भी जान को खतरा, तो मैं क्यों करूं। तो उसने मुझसे एक बात कही, अरे यार मेरी मर्दानगी तो वो तू सब उस थैली में ही फेंक देती। मतलब सीमन को भी मर्दानगी समझते हैं कुछ मर्द तो।
So on the other hand, I have customers who think that being rough or having rough sex will showcase his masculinity more. There are also customers who say that, can I have sex with you without a condom? So when she protests, because we have this whole collectivization of process where we do not have sex with clients without a condom. So the man says that you will waste my manhood inside that plastic which you will use.
एक बार मैंने अपने घर में कुछ कस्टमर आए थे, कस्टमर ऐसे 2-3 आए थे मिलके, दोस्त थे, कोई बड़ा था कोई छोटा था कोई उससे थोड़ा मीडियम ऐसा। तो मैंने उनसे पूछा कि मैं आप लोगों को एक बात पूछ रही हूँ, मर्दानगी मतलब क्या, बोलो। तो एक ने बोला कि बीवी को पीटना मतलब मर्दानगी है, एक ने बोला ऐसा सीना तान के चलो तो वो मर्दानगी होती है, एक ने बोला मूछे रखेंगे तो मर्दानगी है। और फिर इस बात पे वो जो बीवी को पीटने वाला था ना, मैंने उसको क्या बोला कि अरे तू जब रोते हुए मेरे पास आता है ना तो तेरी मर्दानगी कहाँ पे चली जाती है। तो वो बोला नहीं वो बात अलग है, अरे तू तो हमेशा मतलब तू आता है मैं मुझसे बात करता है कि मेरी बीवी मुझे पसंद नहीं है, मेरे बीवी के साथ मुझे सेक्स करना अच्छा नहीं लगता है, इसलिए मैं तेरे पास आता हूँ, और फिर तू अभी क्यों बोल रहा है कि मैं ऐसा मर्द हूँ मैं वैसा मर्द हूँ। तो फिर उसने मुझे बोला कि अरे वो मर्दानगी वाली बात नहीं है किरण, वो तेरी मेरा इंटरनल रिलेशनशिप है, वो ऐसी बातें किसी के सामने नहीं करते। मतलब ये जो ऐसी जो बातें हैं तो हम इस रिलेशनशिप को क्या बोलेंगे, क्लाइंट मतलब मेरा क्लाइंट, या फिर दोस्ती, या फिर एक अच्छा मतलब रिलेशनशिप जो कि जो भी सुख दुख है वो एक दूसरे के साथ शेयर करने वाला।
Okay. So she asked a few of her frequenting clients that what do you think manhood is? So they said that having rough sex, beating my wife, listening to nobody in the house, the manly walk is manhood according to me. So when she pointed out that you come to me and cry about the fact that you do not like your wife, where does your manhood go? So he told her that this has nothing to do with manhood. This is a relationship which you and me have. So this is despite of my manhood. So she's questioning that then what is this relationship? Is it a client? Is it friendship? Or is it something else? Or do we have some relationship where we do not need manhood?
सेक्स वर्कर ऐसा एक्सप्रेस दे सकती है अपने क्लाइंटों को, क्योंकि हमारे सेक्स वर्क मूवमेंट के बावजूद भी सेक्स वर्करों को समाज से बाहर ही देखा जाता है, और सबसे ज्यादा जगह मर्दों को इसलिए मिलती है क्योंकि मेरे सबसे ज्यादा क्लाइंट तो मर्द ही है।
The sex worker is able to provide such a space because she still is seen outside the society despite of her struggles in the sex workers' right movement. Majorly, I'm talking about men in this presentation because most of the clients I have are men.
काफी बार ऐसा होता है ना कि मैं सेक्स वर्कर हूँ, मैं धंधा करने वाली हूँ, मैं गली में रहती हूँ, इसलिए लोग मेरे पास आते हैं, तो लेकिन वो क्लाइंट नहीं होते। क्या हुआ एक बार अभी 2 महीने पहले की बात है कि एक लड़का आया तो वो गली में ऐसे घूम रहा था, मेरे घर के सामने से 10 बार तो गया होगा, उससे घूम रहा था। तो मैंने उसको पूछा क्या रे तुझे कोई औरत चाहिए क्या सेक्स के लिए? तो बोला नहीं दीदी। मैंने बोला क्यों, ऐसा क्यों शर्मा रहा है तू? तो नहीं दीदी आप संग्राम में काम करती हो ना। मैंने बोला हाँ, मुझे ऐसा लगा कुछ HIV वाला पूछ रहा होगा या फिर उसका कुछ प्रॉब्लम होगा। तो मैंने बोला क्यों यहाँ पे आ, मुझे बोल क्या बात है। तो वो आया और एकदम ऐसा चिपक के बैठ गया मुझे। फिर भी मैंने बोला चलो ठीक है। बोला क्या रे क्या बात है, कुछ प्रॉब्लम है क्या तुझे? तो बोला नहीं दीदी मैं आपसे एक बात बोलने वाला हूँ। मैंने बोला बोलना, कितनी देर से तू मैं हमारी गाड़ी निकल जाएगी। उसने मुझे बोला कि दीदी मुझे ना लड़कियों जैसे कपड़े पहनने हैं, मेकअप करना है और आपके साथ गली में घूमना है। तो मैंने बोला ठीक है चल, ठीक है मैंने बोला जाएंगे हम, तुझे लड़कियों जैसा घूमना है ना। फिर मैंने अपना सलवार सूट निकाल के उसे दिया, फिर उसने वो पहना, मेकअप वेकअप सब किया, लिपस्टिक काजल सब लगाया, ऐसे मुंह को ऐसे बांध लिया ओढ़नी से, और मेरा हाथ पकड़ के ऐसा गली में घूम रहा था। तो गली में अक्सर क्या होता है, अगर कोई नई लड़की आती है या कोई नई औरत आती है, उसको पता नहीं होता है, तो ऐसे हमारे जैसे पुरानी जो औरतें होती है उनका हाथ पकड़ के ऐसे घूमती है गली में, वो उस तरह से घूमने लगा। और हर एक औरत मुझसे पूछ रही थी, क्या किरण नई लड़की लाई है क्या, क्या किरण नई लड़की लाई है क्या। और उसको इतनी खुशी हो रही थी उस लड़के को कि उसे ऐसे लगा, मतलब एक थोड़ी देर के लिए तो उसे ऐसे लगा कि हाँ मैं गली में की औरत ही हूँ।
So she's talking about an instance where there are many people who visit her in the brothel areas who might not be clients per se. So there was an MSM person who had visited her and who was being a little apprehensive about sharing what he wanted to, and he was going back and forth from in between, in front of her door. So she, being one of the leaders of the community, asked him that why are you going around? Do you want a girl to have sex with? And he was like, no, I don't want any girl to have sex with. So she said that, why are you being so anxious? Come, let me see what you want. So then eventually, after a lot of coaxing and talking and making him comfortable with a lot of things, he eventually said that I want to dress up like a woman and go around the brothel areas. So she gave him her makeup, her clothes, etc. He dressed up, held her hand, and went around the brothel area. And all the old women who have lived in the brothel areas asked her that, did you get a new girl from somewhere? So the fact that those women were asking her that, is that a new girl, that MSM person, that biological man actually felt good that, I am a woman for X amount number of times till he was there.
इसके केस स्टडी से हमें ये दिखता है कि अगर उसके सामने वाले लिंग भाव का कोई कर रहा है तो उस हाव भाव को समाज और फैमिली में उसे कहीं पे भी जगह नहीं है।
This signifies the lack of spaces within marriage society and families for behaviors mainly attributed to the opposite sex.
हमारे समाज में सिर्फ लैंगिकता के बारे में नहीं, लैंगिक आरोग्य के बारे में भी बातचीत करना सही नहीं समझते हैं।
In our society, it is not just about sexuality, but sexual health is also a taboo.
एक बार की बात है, एक ड्राइवर मेरे घर में मतलब आया था और उसके साथ सेक्स करने के टाइम पे वो थोड़ा हिचकिचाया, तो मैंने बोला थोड़ा हाथ निकाल, मुझे कंडोम मतलब लगाने दे। तो जब उसको कंडोम लगाने के टाइम पे मैंने देखा कि उसके पेनिस पे ऐसा थोड़ा सा फुंसी था। तो मैंने बोला ये क्या हुआ है? अरे क्या हुआ है मुझे ही मालूम नहीं है किरण, 1.5 महीना होगा बीवी के साथ सेक्स नहीं किया। अब बीवी तो क्या कंडोम लगा के सोने वाली नहीं है मेरे साथ, पूछेगी तू कंडोम क्यों लगा रहा है। अगर मैं उसको ये बताती हूँ तो वो बोलेगी तू कहाँ जाके आया है, इसलिए तेरे पास आया हूँ और मैं तेरे पास आज सो के चला जाऊंगा। बोला तो मैंने बोला कि देखूं मैं कहाँ पे तुझे एक ही हुआ है और किसी जगह और जगह हुआ है। तो मैंने उसके पेनिस को उठा के उसके नीचे वगैरह देखा तो 2-3 जगह पे थे। तो मैंने उसको बोला कि देख तू कल सुबह मतलब मेरे घर पे आ जा, मैं तुझे हमारे क्लिनिक में लेके जाके दवाई दिला दूंगी। ये जो बातें होती है मतलब औरत मर्द का या बीवी का और अपने पति का रिश्ता ऐसा इतना मतलब ये होता है कि वो खुल के बोल भी नहीं सकता है कि मुझे क्या हुआ है, और वही बात वो हमारे पास आके ओपन होता है कि मुझे इस जगह ऐसा हुआ है और क्या करना चाहिए।
So she's talking about an instance where there was a driver who was one of her clients had visited her, and while she was going to put on a condom on his penis, she discovered that there is a small pimple or boil on it, and he was not very comfortable showing it to her. So because she's a HIV activist as well, she said that this won't work with me, first you let me see what it is. So she checked around his penis and saw that there are a few more spots there. When she asked him that what is it, he said that I really do not know. I have not had sex with my wife for 1.5 months, and I have come to you because I can have sex with you with a condom. Once I insist on using a condom with my wife, the wife will question me back that why are you using a condom, or what do you have, where have you gone, for which you are telling me to use a condom. So she then sent him to the local clinic which we have in our organization for a checkup, etc. And she's trying to say that how spaces even to have a dialogue with your sexual mate to discuss issues of health which also might affect him or her is not available to us.
क्लाइंट हमारे से सेक्सुअल समाधान के बारे में बात करता है क्योंकि सोसाइटी में उसका बातचीत करना भी मान्य नहीं है, ना तो वो अपनी बीवी के साथ भी नहीं कर सकता है जो जितना फ्री हमारे साथ करेगा। और काफी बार शादी के रिश्ते के अंदर भी इसको मान्यता नहीं होती है। बीवी आएगी, छुई में से सो जाएगी, वो उसको कुछ करेगा, बोलेगा, उसको कुछ लेना देना ही नहीं होता है, ऐसा हो जाता है।
Clients who talk to us about their sexual satisfaction speak to us because to talk about sexual satisfaction in the society is a taboo. The institution of marriage also does not provide a way to such discussions, as it comes with many terms and conditions with which you should talk to your spouse.
मुझे लगता है सेक्स वर्क के तौर पे जो क्लाइंट और सेक्स वर्क के बीच जो घनिष्ठता होती है वो काफी गहरी होती है। लिंग को घुसाना या निकालना यही रिश्ता नहीं होता है सेक्स वर्कर का और क्लाइंट का। हमारे कम्युनिटी से जो बाहर है उनको समझना चाहिए काफी चीजें ऐसी होती है क्लाइंट और सेक्स वर्कर के बीच जो सेक्स से रिलेटेड नहीं होती है, लेकिन वो हमारे सर्विस का भाग होती है। जैसा कि मैं एक थोड़ी बात बताती हूँ यहाँ पे कि समन करना, लिंग को अंदर घुसाना, बाहर निकालना इतना ही रिश्ता नहीं होता है। सेक्स वर्कर एक दोस्त भी होती है, सेक्स वर्कर एक उसके जिंदगी का अहम हिस्सा भी बन जाती है। कभी कभी उसके घर में झगड़ा हो या किसी और के साथ झगड़ा हो या फिर उसके ऑफिस में कुछ हुआ हो तो वो रिलैक्स होने के लिए हमारे पास आता है। और जब हमारे पास आता है तो बहुत से लोगों का ये कहना है या ये समझ है कि सेक्स वर्कर अनेकों के घर तोड़ देती है, लेकिन ये बात सरासर गलत है। क्योंकि जब कोई भी क्लाइंट अपने बीवी से अपने घर से झगड़ के हमारे पास आता है तो हम उसे पहले यही बात बताते हैं, बाबा पहले तेरा घर देख, पहले तेरे बीवी बच्चे देख, उनसे जब तुझे टाइम मिले तब हमारे पास आना।
That for the sex workers, I think that the level of intimacy is stronger when talking about a client-sex worker relationship. This is in opposition to the presumed fact that in sex work the relationship is predominantly for a sole penetrative sexual intercourse. The outsiders of our community need to realize that the other factors which might not be even related to sex per se are also things which the sex workers deals with as part of a service. The sex worker can be a friend, the sex worker can be somebody like an agony aunt. Whenever a client comes to her, the client comes to her with an issue. If the client comes to her with an issue, the sex worker solves it or tries to solve it, supporting the client. A lot of people think that the sex worker breaks a lot of households, but that is not true. I have had clients where I have solved issues where I've told them that first you solve your family issues and then you can come to me and then we can talk about it and have various other discussions.
और ये वाली जो जगह होती है इसमें मर्दानी हर बार परिभाषित होती है जब कोई क्लाइंट मेरे दरवाजे पे आता है।
This is a space where the facets of manhood are defined and redefined every time a client enters my house.
और लास्ट में एक ही बात बोलूंगी मैं, मेरे नजर से अगर मेरे हिसाब से मर्दानगी के बारे में मैं सोचती हूँ तो मैं ये सोचती हूँ कि औरत और मर्द की समानता को जो समझता है, जो पुरुष औरत और मर्द की समानता को समझता है वही मर्द पुरुष है।
She is saying that according to me, manhood or the man who identifies the equality between the man and the woman is a man.
धन्यवाद।
I also want to add one thing. All of what she has said has been done by the community. They have worked very hard for the last 2 weeks to put this together as a presentation.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you very much. I think that with your presentation it makes us very clear that there's a lot of lack of understanding about the real role of sexual workers and the lots of stereotypes that we have about different sexualities. I think that I am really interested in working with sexual workers, and I have learned a lot being linked with them, and I really enjoy when we have the chance to hear from themselves the work that they are doing, how they and they are not only playing a special role, social role, but as she has said, they can bring us a lot of more information about manhood and what is really masculinity is for men. Because this is a freedom space in which just a few people can really go through. And I think that it is very important to hear these testimonies, that we can really begin understanding better. So now we have some time for some questions, comments from the floor, or if you have sent any questions prepared or no? Okay, I'll give the floor first. Can you help me with the mic? Do we have a mic? Oh, yes, there is. Yeah.
Okay, my question is for Tyrone. What I felt about your presentation is that, you kind of treated language and also structures of operation as a monolith. In the sense that nowhere have you reflected on that, language can also be a way of subverting gendered power relationships. If we go to, you've spoken about, very male gendered spaces and reflected on how language is used over there, but what about female spaces? How language is used over there? At least within the Indian context, there's been a lot of study on, say, folk music, folk songs, where women often use that space to subvert certain power relationships. So somewhere, I think you also need to reflect on that. Plus, you've also mentioned colonialism, but I don't see any post-colonial dimension to your research. That how certain categories have been reified after colonialism. So some element of post-colonial analysis also needs to go into why language is the way it is. So that's what I felt about your presentation. So if you could just reflect on that briefly.
I will take 3 questions and then I will give back the word to you.
My question is,
Please use the microphone. I know that you don't like it, but we need to record.
That her experience is very positive and a very favorable interaction and an encounter with the client. What about some very negative and unfavorable kind of situation that sex workers face? 1, 2, the opportunity that giving to the client to chat with, to talk with, other than the act. That kind of opportunity, regarding that kind of opportunity, her community, her organization, sensitized with other sex workers across through other networks or across other parts of the that's my question. Thank you.
I need some time to translate. Thank you very much.
Can you 1 minute, please? 1 minute, please. Okay, please.
Okay, thank you. we do work with sex workers, and our experience is a lot different from this one I've had. This is quite unique. I would like her to share, like someone just said, those kind of experiences. For example, some of the sex workers we work with have cases where they're gang raped. A client comes, negotiates with one of them, then you go to the room, you actually find like a group of men, 10, 15 men, who sleep with this one girl and pay her money worth one person's kind of negotiation. So it's a big problem there. We're finding it hard to engage and see how we need to address those kind of issues. And the environment where they operate, it's very illegal. There's a lot of criticism that they actually face. The society, the way they're looked at and all that, it doesn't seem like the way it is in your case. I don't know, because this seems like a more open kind of space and all that. So I don't know. I would like you to share exactly how you deal with those kinds of challenges. Thank you.
Can I get your country, please?
Please finally, can you answer the question and then
Okay,
I'll give
sure. All right. What's a loaded question? All right. Language and the structure of relations. Well, yes, the presentation is solely about how language is used and how language is used to perpetuate a particular construction of masculine identity along the lines of sexuality, right? Be it heterosexual or not. The initial question was if women also use language to support, how do women utilize language to support or build or create or negotiate space or feel safe as gendered spaces of women? Primarily the study is one of male gendered language use. That's what I would have specified during the presentation. So definitely there would be female gendered space. In the Caribbean, all the research has been done in the Anglophone and the Hispanophone territories of the Caribbean, ranging from Puerto Rico in the north to Guyana in the south, and although Guyana is not an island, it's still considered part of the Caribbean. And the finding is the same. The finding is the same, that largely the safe space for women is in the domestic sphere. And within the employment sector that are traditionally feminine or seen as female, such as anything to do with nurturing, teaching, nursing. Right? There has been breakthrough, of course, right? And women have been matching strides with men. But in terms of power relationships, even where, and this has been the testimony of both males and females, even where women have been able to break that glass ceiling and enter into the boardroom, the male colleagues still utilize a language, albeit a coded language, against the female. They see her as a threat. They see her as someone who has taken the job of a male. They don't see her as a colleague in terms of equality. And that has ramifications too for paid income, wage labor. So although women have their safe space, and even in speaking about the folk song, not so in the Caribbean really. In the Caribbean, when folk songs are done, it's done anchored really in religious customs, and perhaps that is the time when men are most religious, only in terms of a religious observance. But that is where women will feel satisfied and comfortable, but they don't resort to it. In fact, quite the converse. Women are used as pawns in largely a number of social commentary, which is known as the calypso or soca of the Caribbean. Right? And women are partners with men in that without knowing it. How they use their bodies, how they sell the image of their body for men to make money. Right? So and if language is used to support gender or power relationships, actually it's more so by the men. And that is what the study was uncovering, how men promote and support and sustain and nurture power relationships over women, but not only over women, over less powerful men as well. In terms of the post-colonial analysis, colonization is what gave rise to the Caribbean, because it is out of colonization, the Caribbean is what it is. And having been whipped with the rod of colonization, the descendants of the colonies, be it the African slaves or the indented laborers, the East Indian indented laborers, are still grappling with their speech and trying to locate their speech. Language is used, the language of the colonizer, the language of empire is still utilized. And if new languages or new aspects of Creole, new aspects of language come to the fore, it is just simply replacing linguistic terms with other linguistic terms, but it still maintains the dichotomy between male and female generation. So the social inequality or gender inequality is sustained.
पहले तो जो मतलब आया कि बुरी चीज जो है सेक्स वर्क में उनका क्या, तो मैं तो ये कहूंगी कि देखिए सेक्स वर्क हर जगह हमारी तरह से, जैसे हम सेक्स वर्क कर रहे हैं अभी महाराष्ट्र में सांगली में, वहां पे बहुत अच्छी तरीके से चल रहा है क्योंकि वहां पे कलेक्टिवाइजेशन, वहां पे हम एकत्रित है, संगठित है। लेकिन हम ये नहीं कहते कि हर जगह वैसे हो, पूरे भारत में कलेक्टिवाइज हो, फिर वहां पे बहुत अच्छी तरह से सेक्स वर्क चलता है, ऐसे नहीं होता है। हर जगह पे जैसा कि अलग अलग देश है और अलग अलग देशों की अलग अलग रीति है, उस तरह से भारत में भी है। भारत में अलग अलग राज्य है और उनके राज्य की अलग अलग रीति है, उस तरह से है। और दूसरी बात यह है कि अगर पूरे
she's saying that I am not saying that sex workers do not have a bad experience. We in Sangli are talking about a good experience because we have worked with collectivization for the last 20 years, and that is why we have been successful in deviating violence from us within our workspaces. And I'm not saying that sex work is safe all over the country or all over the world. It is different, people are beaten up. I'm just talking about my experience here.
और दूसरी बात यह है कि पूरे देश में करोगे तो आप कैसा करोगे, तो पूरे देश के तो हम ये कहेंगे कि देखो अगर यहाँ पे भी कलेक्टिवाइजेशन का आता है कि जैसे कि हम अभी जो मतलब एकत्रित होने की जो बात हम कर रहे हैं, और हमने एक ये भी चलाया है, मतलब प्रोग्राम चलाया है, संस्था चलाई है NNSW बोल के, नेशनल नेटवर्क ऑफ सेक्स वर्कर। ये पूरे देश के लिए है, भारत देश के लिए। और अभी तो हमारे पास सिर्फ 5 राज्यों से मतलब महिला एकत्रित हुई है। अगर इसी तरह से हमें अगर साथ देते गए सब ऑल ओवर इंडिया वाले, तो हम बहुत जल्दी हमारे जैसे सेक्स वर्करों को सेफ मतलब ये मिलेगा, उनको भी उनके साथ काम करके, उनके साथ जो भी जानकारी उन्हें देके एकत्रित करके, अब जैसे हम सेफ जगह मतलब हमारे लिए सेफ जो है गली में हमारे, उस तरह से उन्हें भी हो जाएगा।
It is obviously difficult to talk about the whole country, but we have a network which has been there for a while now. It's called the National Network of Sex Workers. We have community-based organizations coming from 5 states: Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh, and also Telangana now. So there has been this effort to collectivize sex workers over the country. We are also trying to expand our membership over the country and not just to a certain geographical location. So this is one of the starts where you talk about safe working condition or violence without violence and sex work.
भारत में भी सेक्स वर्क को गुनाह ही मानते हैं। एक औरत अगर खुद की मर्जी से, एक औरत और मर्द खुद की मर्जी से एक रूम में सेक्स करते हैं तो वो गुनाह नहीं है। लेकिन वही औरत बार बार दूसरे मर्द को लेके अगर वो सेक्स करेगी तो उसे गुनाह बहुत जल्दी मानते हैं। दूसरी बात ये है कि सेक्स वर्क गुनाह नहीं है, लेकिन उससे जो जुड़े हुए जो है ना, जैसा कि ब्रॉथेल आया, जैसा कि हम स्ट्रीट पे जाके कहीं सॉलिसिटिंग कर रहे हैं, ये जो सब बातें जो है उसे गुनाहगार अपने आप ही गुनहगार बना देती है।
She's answering your question. she's saying that even in India, sex work is not legalized or decriminalized, etc. We have an act called the ITPA, which is the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, and she says that all activities relating to sex work are criminal. And any woman who is found to commercially exchanging sex is a criminal here. So we also have the issue which you're talking about in terms of the law.
और इस सेफ वर्किंग कंडीशन वातावरण को बनाने के लिए हमें पूरे 20 साल लगे। जैसे अभी किया और ऐसे फटाक से मिल गया, ऐसे नहीं हुआ। इसको झगड़ने के लिए, इस लड़ाई को लड़ने के लिए हमें पूरे 20 साल गए, तब जाके हमें कहीं तो यहाँ थोड़ी सी कामयाबी मिली।
To gain this safe working condition which I am talking about and which I am experiencing, it has took us 20 years to reach this at a certain level, not completely. So it is not something we start one day and it gets done at the second day. It is a process of collectivization which takes a lot of time, and we have at a certain level achieved it.
Yes.
Yes. Some other questions?
No question. I'm just adding the word.
Wait.
Myself, Resma. I'm a transgender. I'm adding National Network of Sex Workers also connects the transgender group. I'm also happy with the NNSW, and they also think about the transgender sex workers. So they just doing more transgender stuff and history of population and just be doing the sex work as so only is just not to be connected. Sex work is with only females or gender rights. It is connected with transgender and female person.
I think I'll answer this. When you're talking about sex work, it's just her experience as a female sex worker. But I don't think in her experience
No,
as male or female.
No. The enterprise are just saying about yeah, I'm adding NNSW also. I'm also a part of the NNSW.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, please. Here.
Thank you. My question is directed to Kiran. I just want to find out, because you seem to have found a way of negotiating even power with men. Is it something to do with the sex worker's character or ability, or what is it that everybody else can do even within the family home? What is it that a wife can do to then be able to negotiate? And I'm saying this because I'm thinking in terms of the gender-based violence, talking about sex, and even condom negotiation, talking with the youth. What can we harness from your experiences which we can take to people that are not sex workers in sexual relationships?
Thank you. Please. Can you please come here? Not to the front first. Here.
Thank you very much for these really, really interesting presentations. I would have one question for Kiran and one question for Sarah.
Can you please wait? Okay, then.
My question for Kiran would be, you mentioned that the majority of your customers were male. What about, could you maybe comment on the others as well? So I guess that would be female and third gender.
Okay.
And one question for Sarah. You mentioned some differences between the men based on class, on the language use, but did you see any kind of difference also then based on age and sexual orientation, and any kind of more positive, more gender equitable use of language coming out from any of the men?
Okay. Thank you.
My question is from Kiran. Kiran, I felt in your presentation, the focus was more what the client gets from sex workers.
and what you provide, your relationship in terms of male, actually what he gets, and your relationship. I could feel that what sex worker gets, what she gets beyond money, and in terms of if I'm working, I'm a worker. What about my job satisfaction? One thing is that the topic of this session is about pleasure also. So in terms of pleasure, bodily pleasure or soul pleasure, and also as a worker, job satisfaction. What about women? Why women always give explanations that we are not taking homes, etc. For me, women sex workers, their feelings, their pleasure, that's more important to hear.
Back there, please.
मैं पूछ सकता हूँ? किरण जी, मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि आप जो अभी ये NNSW के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, तो फिर आपके पास तो फैक्ट फिगर्स होंगे। मैं सिर्फ ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि मेल सेक्स वर्कर वो क्या इस नेटवर्क में शामिल होते हैं? आपके पास फैक्ट फिगर्स हैं? और आप जो जिस कलेक्टिवाइजेशन के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, उनमें क्या मेल सेक्स वर्कर्स भी इन्वॉल्व हैं? बस ये।
Thank you. Can you translate that?
Oh, I'm sorry. He's asking, you're talking about the National Network of Sex Workers, and because you're working with them,
You might be knowing about the facts and figures which are available to you. Can you tell us about the participation of male sex workers in that collective and the organization which you come from? Do you also work with male sex workers?
Thank you. The last one, please.
किरण जी, आपसे सवाल ये है कि आप लोगों ने लैंग्वेज के ऊपर काम किया, so you have worked on language, so it mostly deals with the issues of how you negotiate. Your presentation was ethnography. It's more about the narrativization as a person who is coming from that space, that domain. और आप जो language बोला, आपने language के ऊपर काम किया, it gives a post-colonial interpretation of sex work, where you have negotiated the space with more negotiation of different kinds of men and masculinity that works in that situation. Vis-a-vis the case with men who is coming with different kinds of sexual health issues, which could only be spoken with the sex workers, where you got certain elements of truth and knowledge about what is sexual health, which vis-a-vis the household doesn't know, the wife doesn't know. And at the same time, the other source of masculinity, where a person who considers himself as considering to be kind of dressed as a woman and dressed as a woman and could express his alternate masculinity, a different sense of representation, gender representation to you. So it kind of gives a broader dimension of you as a, with a sense of adding some value to the feminist perspective of you, who is not only just a sex worker, but a more, much greater value to your movement. So that's a reflection.
Thank you.
Can you translate that into Hindi as well? I don't think I can do it.
आप यही बात हिंदी में बोल सकती हैं।
I will say it.
She didn't have a question. Her was a reflection.
It was not a question.
Yeah, but I think it's important for her to understand that translation. So can she translate that?
She can do it later, no? Okay, she already mentioned she will do it later.
Very small. Come on. This is the last one. Really last one, because we have to.
I just want to know, are there sex workers who want to come out of sex work? And at least, by and large, on an average, are they happy doing sex work, or they are just doing it as a matter of, since there is no other means of livelihood or employment? And in the long term, how do you view it?
Sure.
Okay. Madam, please.
Thank you. Yes, the obvious difference would have been among the social class, where the working class use those labels against women or to maintain power more openly than with the middle class. But there are other differences, some positive, some negative. Basically, in terms of age, there is the difference where the older men use the traditional labels. That's what I was saying, just the labels change, but it's still the same effect. So an older man would call a female the old hoe or the slut, whereas the younger generation have more current labels for it, scatter or skunk, right? So the linguistic label changes, but the impact, the gender inequality remains. There's a second issue. In terms of who sets the trend, the research shows that the Afro-Caribbean man sets the trend in generating new labels as time evolves. And perhaps that can be the impact of media, popular culture, that kind of thing, right? And the other Caribbean men follow suit. The third and final issue is in terms of has there been any positive change? There has been to a certain degree among the middle class, where the educated youngster is more socially aware, more gender sensitive, and seems to be, if anything, the agent of change to come.
Thank you very much. Yes, miss. Do you have any comments or answers to the question?
पावर निगोशिएट के बारे में हम ये कहेंगे कि कस्टमर के साथ हमें भी कंडोम मतलब इस्तेमाल करने के लिए या फिर जो भी हमारे हेल्थ के प्रॉब्लम्स है ये वो समझने के लिए बहुत देर लगी। जब हम समझ गए, जब खुद इंसान जब खुद समझता है तो दूसरों को समझाने में टाइम नहीं लगता। तो उसी तरह से हमारा भी हुआ कि हमने खुद समझा और फिर हमने कस्टमर के साथ बात करके उन्हें समझाना शुरू किया। और अगर अभी भी ऐसी मतलब कभी कभी होता है कि नहीं सुनते हैं कोई कस्टमर, तो ठीक है, यहाँ पे हमारा 500 रुपए लॉस हो गया तो हो जाने दो, हम नहीं आपके साथ विदाउट कंडोम नहीं सेक्स करेंगे। और आप सोचते हो नहीं कैसा ना, ये हम सोचते हैं। जहाँ तक हमारा संग्राम और व्याप जहाँ तक काम करता है, हम लोग 5500 औरतों में काम करते हैं और हमारे पास 2400 एमएचएम और पीजी के साथ हम काम करते हैं। उनका अलग से सीबीओ है और फीमेल सेक्स वर्कर का अलग है। तो जब हम इतने लोगों में काम करते हैं तो हम ये भी समझ लेते हैं कि कंडोम के बारे में निगोशिएशन करना बहुत जरूरी है और वो हमारा जीवन है।
We work with 2,400 MSMs and transgender sex workers, and we also work with 5,500 women. So 5,500 women. And when you talk about condom negotiation, it took us time to first understand how important it is for us and our health as sex workers. And then we could go forward and talk about it to the client. And we have collectivized to such an extent that if there is a client, because we do get clients who will say that I will not wear a condom, we will not entertain that client and we will consider that as a loss which we have incurred that day or that week.
और इसको घर के अंदर कैसे डालेंगे? तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल तो प्रॉब्लम क्या है बोलूं? हम भी सेक्स वर्कर जो है ना, अपना पार्टनर जो जिसको रखते हैं ना, मतलब पार्टनर भी होता है हमारा। ऐसा नहीं कि हम सिर्फ कस्टमर करते हैं, हमारा भी कोई जीजान वाला होता है। तो उसके साथ कैसे है कि जो समझते हैं बहुत ज्यादा वो तो कंडोम का मतलब इस्तेमाल करते हैं, लेकिन कोई जो ऐसा बहुत अंदर से प्यार उमड़ के आ रहा है, बहुत हमारा लव हो रहा है, वो ना अपने पार्टनर के साथ कंडोम नहीं इस्तेमाल करते हैं। वो हमारा थोड़ा सा इतना प्रॉब्लम है।
When you're talking about the family circuit, to be very honest, she's saying that even we have partners who are not our clients, but they are partners. we do try to use condoms, but there are people who love their partner too much and who will not be able to negotiate at that level. So they might or might not use the condom with their partners.
NNSW के बारे में आपने बोला था कि NNSW में मेल सेक्स वर्कर भी है क्या, आपका सवाल था। तो हाँ, हम MSM जो है मेल सेक्स मेल, वो लोग भी हमारे NNSW के मतलब ग्रुप में शामिल है और वो अभी हमारे NNSW के बोर्ड मेंबर भी।
Thank you.
She's saying that the NNSW also have male sex workers and they're also part of the board.
MSM also different to the MSW, male sex workers. MSM also different to the male sex.
Yeah, but
Can you please help me with the micro? Well, I think that this is a very interesting discussion, and the testimonies bring us a new perspective, a new point of view of different situations. And in this session, I think that we know that the working with our body, sexual work, is not the same. It has different meanings, it has different situations, and we are very clear about it. What we have heard is one case of this organization. This is an organization, as she has said, that has taken 20 years of organizing to really come to what they have reached. So this is not an illusion, this is not something that just happened. This is a very difficult situation that we know that in many countries, as in mine, I'm Mexican, we faced a lot of difficulties and illegal situation for sexual work. So I think that we can recover from this experience what the social role that they are playing and how better we can understand some of the dimensions that are involved in this process. But we know that this is a much more complex and difficult situation that we have to take into account. In the other presentation, I think that it is very clear that colonialism in some regions as Caribbean and some countries in Africa and Asia, we are now having these difficulties with the machismo and with homophobia that are spreading all over. So this is a challenge that Tyron has brought us with his research, and this is still a lot of work to do in this field. But I think that these two presentations have contributed to our new ideas, to bring us new ideas and some reflections about what are the challenges that we're facing every day. As I said at the beginning of the session, we were missing the moderator, the former moderator of the session, Mina. But I wanted to use Ayotzi as a name because in Mexico we're still missing 43 students, and I want to remember that. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, that was a very good one. She's very interesting. She's okay, I'm from Malaysia. Would like to take photograph with her? Yeah, sure. ये मलेशिया से आई है। इसलिए मैं आपके साथ आपका जो प्रोग्राम था वो बहुत
Hindi na subscribe.